be with you.
And with your spirit.
A reading from the Holy Gospel according to St. John. When it was evening, the disciples of Jesus went down to the sea, embarked in a boat, and went across the sea to Capernaum. It had already grown dark, and Jesus had not yet come to them. The sea was stirred up because a strong wind was blowing. When they had rowed about 3 or 4 miles, they saw Jesus walking on the sea and coming near the boat, and they began to be afraid. But Jesus said to them, "It is I, do not be afraid." They wanted to take him into the boat, but the boat immediately arrived at the shore to which they were heading. The Gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, Lord Jesus Christ.
About 8 years ago, my daughter studied abroad one semester in London, and she was my oldest, so this was the first time I'd ever had experienced anything like this, and I think it's probably fair to say I was a bit of a nervous wreck that semester. But the months went by without incident, and it was time for her to come home. So about 3 or 4 days before her flight left London, I was sitting in my house here one morning, having a relative moment of peace. I was doing some reading. Life was good. Karina was coming home. But there's always something. The phone rang, and I answered it, and I knew right away who it was. It was a good friend of Karina's, and she sounded kind of hesitant when she said, Dawn, I'm just calling to see if Karina's okay. And so instantly I was on alert, and I said, what do you mean, why? And she said, oh, you haven't heard. This was July 7th, 2005. You may remember that there were several bombs that were detonated in London in their mass transport system that day. The same transport system that Karina was using when she was in London. And there were 56 people that were killed that day and over 700 injured. So I was panicked, and I was trying to call her on the phone. I was looking up information on the internet. I couldn't get through because the lines were all tied up. So after a couple of tense hours of trying every few minutes to call her, the phone rang, and it was Karina. I still, today, remember that physical feeling of relief that just flooded through me. It was like I was reconnected and I could breathe. I could breathe again. So there's always something. I think we could name the gospel that we just heard. There's always something. Here these disciples were, they're exhausted. They've just been feeding all day long. They were feeding the 5,000 loaves and the fish, 5,000 not counting women and children. And they're exhausted. All they're trying to do is get to the other side of the Sea of Galilee. But the Sea of Galilee is surrounded by these mountains that funnel winds down to the sea. And it can kick up storms really unexpectedly. And this is what's happened with them. So they've been rowing, and they're tired. And we think it's nighttime when this happened. And Jesus isn't even with them because he needed a quiet moment after feeding the 5,000, so he went off to pray by himself. He's not even there with them. So they're dealing with this storm, and then here he comes. Here something comes, walking on the water toward them, and they're terrified. They don't know what it is. And then comes that voice. It's me. Don't be afraid. And there was that connection for them, that connection to Jesus, because they knew they were safe. And with Jesus, they could do anything. There's always something. Life is full of those moments for us, isn't it? It almost seems that we can live in a state of fear knowing that this happens. I have a brother-in-law who said to me once, you know, I'm always waiting for the ball to drop. Always waiting for the ball to drop. A sick child, a new conflict somewhere in the world that may threaten us, contact from the doctor's office to come back in for tests when we thought we were just having a routine physical. These are things that can just send us into a tailspin. And so we have this need to connect and reconnect, to always hear this voice that tells us over and over, it's okay, all is well, you're not alone. It can be a voice on the phone from London. It can be kind words from a reassuring friend. It can be the quiet whisperings in our heart that we know is the Spirit of God speaking to us in prayer or when we come to the table of Eucharist. But always it's this amazing and tremendous moment of knowing once again that it's not about the always somethings, because there's always something. We're more than that. We have a God who cherishes and holds us and stands with us in the storms, saying to us, it's me. Don't be afraid. There's always something, but we are an Easter people. And the promise of Easter is that because of Jesus and with Jesus, we can walk on top of the waves, not sink.